Well, hi, everybody. Welcome back to My Favorite Mistake. I'm Mark Graven. Our guest today is Beate Chelette. She's the growth architect and founder of the Women's Code. She provides visionaries and leaders with proven strategies, blueprints, and growth maps that provide clear steps to improve business systems, strengthen leadership skills and teams so that their clients and audiences can maximize profits and scale their impact. She's a first-generation immigrant who found herself, as her bio says, $135,000 in debt as a single parent. But Beate bootstrapped her passion for photography into a global business that licensed content in the 79 countries, and she exited in a multi-million dollar deal when she sold the company to Bill Gates. Beate is the host of a podcast, the Business Growth Architect Show, and her book is titled Happy Woman, Happy World, the Foolproof Fix that takes you from overwhelmed to awesome. So Beate, thank you for joining us on the podcast. How are you?
I am terrific. I'm excited to be here. We waited for a little while to make this happen. So I am fired up and I'm ready to talk about mistakes or how to avoid them or how not to make them.
Or what we learn, all of the...
Or what we learn.
Yeah. So I'm excited to dig into that and talk about your business and the way you help entrepreneurs and people like myself. So there's a lot to explore here. But there's one question I have to ask though, just in terms of introductions. The bio doesn't say what the business was that you sold. So tell us a little bit about that before we get into favorite mistakes.
Yes. So I come originally from the creative world. So I am a photographer by trade. That is the only degree that I have, the only formal degree I have. But I always was better at the business side of it. So I combined the two, and the business that I sold was a stock photography syndication. We were specialized in architecture, interior, and living well imagery. So if you were to go to the bank, and let's say your bank is Bank of America, Wells Fargo, and you'll see the picture that says, do you want to refinance your house? And there's a picture, we would have provided that image, and we provided images for in hundreds of coffee table books and websites, with design ideas. And part of it was a celebrity at home division. And we were and had become very quickly the world leader in that category. And that's what attracted the Bill Gates company to make us an offer too good to refuse.
Yeah. And I'm sure he has a lot of businesses and ventures. Did you ever get to meet him directly or no?
No, unfortunately, I have not. But I was told that he was personally signing off on the acquisition of my company.
Yeah. I'm sure that felt good too. So
that felt great.
Well, good. Better than good. Great. So, Beate, the different things, that you've done in your career, looking back at it, thinking about it, what would you say is your favorite mistake?
I think my favorite mistake was getting involved in a lawsuit and wanting to be right about something that I was right about, but it was, looking back, not worth the time because I fought for an entire year. It took everything. And then after the entire year, when it was settled, all we did was make the lawyers rich. I got rid of my debt and I started at zero all over again. So I could have saved myself the entire year and maybe not been right, but having had the same result.
Wow. Do you mind? So can you tell us some more of the detail of what was the situation that led to the dispute and the lawsuit? Is this something you filed against you? It'd be good to hear some of the detail if you can.
Yeah, no, I'll be happy to dive into that a little bit later. Well, it was like one of those moments, Mark, where you sit there and you go like, something's happening, and you just get the vibe, and you said something's going on in this office that doesn't feel right. So I fired my my assistant, my only employee at the time, and it turns out I fired her 2 weeks too late. She had come up with this idea of running a business, which was my business, just without me. So the new version of this business that she was running it with my key vendor. So they got a little bit too close. I don't know what they did or didn't do. But next thing I know, that invoices that I had billed were not paid to me. And then when I contacted the client and says, hey, the bill is outstanding, they said, oh, we were informed that you were withholding money and that we paid them directly because they're now a new company. And I said, what?
Right.
So I was absolutely shocked. And so not just had they misappropriated trade secrets, walked out with my list and done all kinds of things, but they also went behind my back to talk to, our clients, and then had that money sent to them, and then not sent me the commission that I had earned on these sales. Because typically I would get the money, I would take my commission out, and then I'd pay the photographer. And so I couldn't believe it, because it was my key vendor and my employee.
Yeah.
And so that's when I sued both of them for misappropriation of trade secret, for fraud, for withholding money, and we were talking about good size amounts here.
Mhm.
And in this lawsuit, as we went in further, what I did not know at the time is that this photographer was insured through a group photography insurance through a photography association, and it included errors and omissions.
Mhm.
And that meant that I didn't realize that lying was part of errors and omissions, but clearly.
That doesn't sound, I mean, that's surprising to me, right? I mean, it seems like there's a difference between a legitimate professional judgment error. An architect does the math wrong and some wall collapses. That seems very different, right?
Well, but as this unfolded, what I realized is that this company is one of the largest insurance companies in
Mm.
America. And because they do this insurance and offer that to photographers, they could not have a case that went to trial that I could potentially win. So they made it as expensive as they possibly could, dragging it out as long as they possibly could to bleed me dry until I couldn't afford. And they just about succeeded, because that's when I got, the first time in my life, $130,000 in debt. And then, the mental anguish. So what is about a lawsuit, right?
Mhm.
A lawsuit, I think, in my opinion, needs to be avoided at all cost, because it is not about being right. It's about who has the deeper pockets.
Mhm.
You and I, we talked about in the green room that once the machine kicks in, the machine runs, and there's nothing you can do to stop that machine. So
Mhm.
once something is filed and you've committed, that machine runs, and you cannot stop it. Like, you literally cannot stop it
Mhm.
until it runs its certain course. And so the hardest thing for it was, number one, the money. You didn't
Right.
know where the money really went, because the lawyer writes a letter, a complaint, and then they are responding to that complaint. So I paid $20,000 to write this letter. I'm thinking I'm paying a retainer, but it's really for
Mhm.
one letter. Then they're writing a letter back, and guess what? That letter has to be responded to.
Mhm.
So research has to be made, the letter has to be written, time goes
Right.
in. And then they're writing a letter, and then the letter needs a response. And so it keeps going back and forth.
Mm.
And then there's the discovery, and then you have to produce all these documents. So the amount of time and energy, and it's not good energy, it's
Mhm.
bad energy, it's
Mhm.
toxic energy, it's angry energy. Is, first of all, you've been betrayed, you're already
Right.
upset about what these people did to you, and you're upset at yourself for not seeing it coming. You're upset that you set up your business to allow something like this to happen. You're mad that you didn't fire her ahead of time. You're mad at him for, riding on the coattails of women his entire life. Needless to say, he screwed her later on as much as he screwed me.
Mm.
The only consolence I found is that, he did eventually get screwed himself
Yeah.
by the person that he replaced me with to,
Mm.
do his resale.
Wow.
So from a mistake perspective, and to say, what did I do? What did I learn? I learned that you have to be, that your mental health, your mental state, and your ability to enjoy your life, if you give that away to anger, and you give that away to this moment of, I rather be right. So that was so important to me, to be right,
Mhm.
that
Right.
I forgot all the other things that would bring. And then all
Sure.
the other things overtook the being right until being right didn't matter anymore.
Yeah. Mm. And I mean, I've got a couple questions. I apologize that this is, I mean, understandably, mental anguish, and I appreciate you, sharing the story and being willing to relive or recount a little bit of this. But can you tell us a little bit more about, you said earlier that like you had a bad feeling about the assistant, and if you had taken action 2 weeks sooner, she wouldn't have been able to do what she did. Can you tell us a little bit more about the thought process at the time as you remember it?
Yeah, it really was, and I have pretty good intuition, and I know I have very good intuition. God only knows why I didn't listen to it, but I was in the middle of production season. And so things were happening. I was out in the field, I was producing. I just wasn't in the office enough. But
Mm,
there was a vibe, there was a vibration, Mark, that just felt off. And in a tone and a little bit of a hostility
mm,
and snappiness, and I couldn't quite figure out what it was. And then it literally was just before Christmas. I sat down, I said, okay, I don't know what it is, but it's palpable. So I said,
yeah.
I'm sorry, I can't do this anymore. Something's going on. And then literally over Christmas, like in those, whatever, 7, 8 days, they were up and running and
Mm,
had invoices paid to them. So she had, while I was out in the field, copied invoices
mhm.
and taken them out of the office and then build their business on. I mean, it was just nuts what they
Yeah.
did. So So I definitely want to stress the importance that if you think something's off, you're
Mhm.
right.
Yeah.
If you have reservations about something or someone, you're right.
Mhm.
If you feel that there is something that they're withholding, you're right.
Right.
So there's a saying that they say, when people reveal themselves to you, believe them the first time.
Yeah. Mm. And your recourse was purely in the civil courts? I mean, because it seemed like if she had literally stolen $50,000 cash, that might be then a criminal larceny, theft, whatever it might be called. I'm not a lawyer, but stealing,
Commissions. Hmm.
I mean, stealing the business from you was not considered a criminal offense.
Well, I mean, they did steal more than $50,000
Yeah.
because, my commissions, my contractually agreed upon commission on these sales was, I think, it ended up then, he had to pay me on that alone over $60,000. But yeah, you would think so, but then we would have to file a criminal complaint. And so we went to civil court and we did that. And as you are kind of going into it, there's a point where you go, I can't put myself through this anymore. And so I did not want to pursue further actions after this. I had learned my lesson. I
Mhm.
got to be right. um, I got to pay off my debt. I had to start all over again. I lost a year of my life. But I think that would have been even worse,
Yeah.
honestly.
Yeah. I mean, so was there a judgment, a ruling in your favor, or a settlement that,
They
I
settled.
know you're saying it wasn't worth the effort, but that at least there was something. Do I hear you right?
Yes, they did settle, because at the end of it, my attorney, my 5-foot firecracker attorney, said to me, we're going to have to stay the course so that they think you're going to court. Whatever it takes,
Mhm.
you have to keep up that appearance. That's the only thing that's going to want to make him settle. Because if
Sure.
you show weakness now, we're dead in the water. So I kept up the thing, and we said we filing for a court date.
Mhm.
And it wasn't until we filed for the court date that they then said, well, let's not be hasty. Let's settle this. And then they came up with a lowball offer that wouldn't even have gotten rid of my debt. And I said to my attorney, I don't need to settle for something that's going to leave me even further in debt.
Yeah.
If I'm going to settle, then at least I'm going to have to get rid of this thing that I'm having hanging over my head.
And had her actions, I mean, did that kill your business when she walked
Yes.
away with all that? It
Yes.
sounded like it would have, just to,
Yes, it did. Yes, it did.
And so then you're in this process, and yeah, as you're saying, this machine is running. I mean, even if at some point you were thinking, okay, should I drop the case, the mental energy, the time, the anger, it's not worth it. Now the reality is you have legal bills. So I'm sure then there's this factor of like, well, I wish I could drop the case, but the lawyers
The machine runs.
need to get paid. The machine needs to be fed.
Yeah, exactly. That's it. Like you look at this and you go, now you're in so deep that you either are going to pull the plug and then you're on the hook for everything. That would have been $130,000.
Right.
Or you are going to say, I'm so far in, I'm not going to drown in a puddle. I'm going all the way. And
Mhm.
I'm really a not drown in the puddle kind of person. If I drown, it'll be the ocean. I mean, at $130,000, it's definitely worth it, more than for $10,000. So at least I would have had justification, and everybody would have said, you know, I totally get it. You were deep into debt. You weren't getting anywhere with this. You were fighting, you know, one of the top 3 insurance companies in America with pockets, you know, deeper than anything, who do nothing other than and stamp deny, 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 deny on anything. So that's a crossroad. And I opted to stay the course, see it all the way through, and then surrender to the outcome,
Mhm.
whatever the outcome would have been.
Yeah. So then from there, I'm curious then how you picked yourself up and how your career and other businesses evolved from that, getting things back on a track to other successes.
Yeah. So how did Cinderella get the prince? And so as I am standing in front of the ashes of everything I had done up until this point, and the business that I had at the time was a photography representation business and a photography production business. And what happened 6 months into the lawsuit, or 9 months into the lawsuit exactly, on September 11th, with $500,000 in production jobs on the book for Mercedes and BMW and Levi Strauss and Wrangler, September 11th hits.
Yeah. Hmm.
And with that, in 24 hours, the rest of my business went down in flames. That it was over. I mean, literally was over. In literally 24 hours, everything, it was game over.
Mhm.
So I hung in, you know, for another 3 months. The lawsuit settled exactly a year after I filed it. And then I had to start all over again. And I started to build on the knowledge that I had in photography, building that stock photography syndication. But I had nothing, you know, I had to start from scratch. So now I'm going again in debt, deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper. And, you know, there really wasn't anything else. And so now I'm $135,000 in debt this time. And I'm thinking, okay, well, this is, I can't find any more money. I'm borrowed money. I maxed out my line of credit. I maxed out my credit cards. I maxed out EDV advance. I'm borrowing money to pay interest on borrowed money. And I made all the payments, but this was you know, at this point it's over.
Yeah.
And so I fly to Germany. I meet my dad. My dad had a stroke. My dad did not have a stroke. My father had pancreatic cancer,
Mhm.
and my father dies within 6 weeks.
Wow.
So now I am here, you know, after this massive betrayal of what I just been through, with this lawsuit that ended up to very little.
Mhm.
Being $135,000 debt, my best friend's dead. I have no business. I can't figure out how to do it all. And I think this is it, you know. Now game is over. I mean, it was over a year ago, but I kind of figured it out. And then now it's really over. And I fell to my knees, Mark, and I raised my fist to God and I yelled at him. I said, you know what? If you have a plan, this would be a really great time right now to fill me in, because I don't even get
Sure.
it. It's like,
Sure.
what the heck is going on here?
Mhm.
And then I surrendered, you know, because now I wasn't drowning in a puddle. Now I was drowning in the ocean. I'm like, okay, fine. At least now it's worth it.
Mhm.
Came back to Los Angeles after my father has been buried. And at the funeral, I get a call from my office in Los Angeles, like literally at the grave, like 5
Yeah.
minutes after the funeral. It's my office from Los Angeles, just been served a notice, and I was losing the house too.
Oh, boy.
so that's it. I mean, what else, what else kind of can you do? So I got back. I'm like, I don't even know what to do. Looking for bankruptcy attorneys. Like, somehow I have to figure out how to get out of it. And I'm a single mom. I'm an immigrant. There's nobody here to help me.
Mm.
And I get a letter from the White House. Because in my absolute desperation, Mark, I had written a letter to the White House, to the President of the United States, to help me. Because my former mother-in-law kept nagging me about this. You got to write a letter to the president. He's your president. If anybody can help you, as the president, and on and on. I'm like, you know what? I'm going to write the damn letter.
Right. So this is 2002, George W. Bush.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I get the letter from the White House. They put me in touch with the Small Business Administration, with the second in command. I walked in with my business plan, which I was prepared, Mark. I had done all the work. I had my business plan. I had my portfolio samples. I walked in. I said, I am just not getting out of this. I need help here. And so they helped find me a bank, restructured my debt into a 10-year fixed loan, freed up my line of credit. 3 months later, I'm break even. 18 months later, I'm the world leader in my category. Bill Gates' company comes, knocks, and I sell it for millions.
Wow. I mean, I can't help admire the resilience in the face of all of that, and fighting to create a new opportunity and asking for help and getting help and doing what you needed to do. That's very powerful.
I think that you don't know how strong you are unless you're under pressure. And there are two things that you learn when you make mistakes, or when things that happen to you appear to be mistakes. Because now, if I'm looking back, Mark, and somebody would say, well, do you think, Beate, that these, whatever, 13 years of just like nuts that led up to these like final finale of these 2 years, that was worth it? Then I would say, well, yeah, I'm a millionaire. I'm a multimillionaire now.
Yeah.
But back then I didn't know that. So I think the detachment, that the judgment of what the experience is, as good or bad, is necessary to activate these pieces of you that you need to push through this next level of whatever that next level is, because you can't run a multi-million-dollar company unless you have a certain kind of attitude. You can't run a team of people unless you made mistakes in running people. You can't figure out what the opportunities are unless something's been taken away from you and you had to find new opportunities. You have to do that really quickly.
Yeah. So then, Beate, how often do you find yourself giving advice or helping business owners who are in a similar, if you will, rock bottom kind of situation? They're having to bounce back, reinvent themselves, start again.
I prefer to catch them earlier.
Sure.
This time around, that's my message now, Mark, is to say, if you don't step in action now, I can tell you what's going to happen. When you are in a point where you can't act anymore, where you can really only react, you're in a very tough spot. So this really requires then absolute massive, drastic personal changes and a mindset shift. I mean, then you're going through fire with thorns and people poking you. So preferably we catch business owners before they hit the bottom.
Yeah.
Because I do not recommend this to anybody.
Yeah. Well, there's and that's a more effective time to be helpful. And then, like, at the risk of making a mistake here, I'm sounding crass. As a consultant, coach, advisor, you need someone to be able to pay you. So helping them avoid rock bottom, keeping their business going with your assistance. I mean, it's better on different levels. Of course, the human level of not wanting to see people go through that, but then from your own business, it's good that you can help people avoid it. What signs do you help people look for?
It's generally the feeling that they're in an infinity loop, and the infinity loop goes something like this. I have invested in internet marketing, from funnel hacking to quiz building to product launching to selling from stage, speaking from stage, converting better. I have invested in 10 different things. I've put in $200,000 and I'm still in the same situation.
Right.
I am trying to get clients. The market keeps changing rapidly.
Mhm.
So I keep changing my messaging. I feel like I'm doing too many things.
Mhm.
The message is starting to get really confusing, but I feel like I have to keep adjusting to respond to that. Lots of customization of solutions, and then they get completely worn out, and
Mm.
they sound confused, and their confidence starts to erode.
Yeah.
Or they are growing, but they can't scale,
Mhm.
and they can't scale it because you cannot scale yourself. So they either finding business, or they take their foot off the pedal and then they perform the service, and then they can't sell anymore. And
Yeah.
then that dries up, and then they go over here, and now they're in this infinity loop where they constantly go between one and the other. That's when you call me, because
Yeah.
I come in and I help them to scale
Mhm.
this so they can build their authority and make
Uh,
impact.
How do you build trust if you're the 11th thing to come in and help after, if they're worn out on, maybe they're thinking it's the 11th and you're my final hope, or what's the line from Star Wars? You're my last hope.
Yeah, exactly. You're the last hope. Well, the idea here is to say you probably can use a lot of the stuff that you've already invested in. You just haven't built your strategy around the actual business strategy. You try to build a business strategy with things that you bought. That doesn't work.
Mm.
So, it's like, going back to an example of a relationship. You need to get clear, if you want to be in a good relationship, what it is that you're looking for. You're looking for somebody who's active, you can ski with, somebody who likes eating out, somebody who's liking to cook. You need compatibility. So if and you have tried many things, but it's not like you randomly go and meet people. I mean, that's why dating doesn't work. If you randomly go meet people and then you say, that could work, maybe I can make that work. Or, oh, a brunette. All right, I can do a brunette, a blonde. All right. Well, oh, she doesn't not active. Okay, maybe beach vacations are not so bad. That just sounds weak and uninformed
Mhm.
and confusing.
Yeah.
But if I know what I like, that I like to ski, I like to be active, I don't mind a nice vacation on the beach ever so often.
Right.
Um, then it's much easier for me to identify that partner. And so it's very much like that. It's like you need to have an overall strategy that is a business model that works for you.
Mhm.
If
Right.
the business model works for you, then we can reverse engineer and we say, well, these things that you have already invested in, how can we use them now in the strategy that you don't have, that I help you do, to maximize your return on investment? Because you can't maximize your return unless you know where it fits.
Mhm. So, I mean, you make me think of, there's an old entrepreneurship tip, of not just focusing on what you can do and what you want to do and what customers need. You'd better make sure and test early on that there's a sustainable business model.
100%. And I mean, that's why, we have people that do what you do, that do podcasts and get the message out to share the information. And if you are listening, please do us a favor. Go to wherever you pick up the show and subscribe to the show. Leave Mark a 5-star review, maybe with like one takeaway, and share this particular episode with one other person that needs to hear what we're talking about.
Yeah. Oh, well, thank you, Beate. It's very kind and giving of you. I appreciate that. I was about to point, now it sounds like a quid pro quo, but I was planning on sharing about your website. So for one, you can go to beatechelette.com, and I'll put a link in the show notes. But there, there's one site, and I went and I did this earlier, growthblockerquiz.com, of answering some questions. It wasn't that involved. It wasn't that painful. I still need to go back into part 2 of the survey, Beate, because it really does make you think of trying to figure out, okay, for me, my business, what's my business growth blocker? But like I'm not trying to make it a coaching session about my business, but what are the most common blockers from, let's say, people filling out the survey? Can you share, a couple of the things that might really be holding someone back from growth and success?
Well, I actually think it's probably really great for the audience if you make it a little bit of a coaching session, because then they go and they feel like they're behind the scenes listening into the real stuff happening in real time. So typically what happens is that there's 3 different pieces that people struggle with. Either they don't have a strategy, they don't have a system, or they don't know how to build their authority. You have to be number one right now in this market, an authority, an expert. And I'm not saying authoritative.
Mhm.
I'm saying an authority, a leader, an expert in your particular industry. I'm also not saying a celebrity.
Right.
I'm also not saying you're going to be measured by how many followers you have, or
Yeah.
on whether or not you're going viral. The only thing that goes viral, really, if you really think about it, are cats that ski or really stupid stuff people do, none of which is in our category.
And that's not part of the business model.
It isn't. The only post I've ever had that went viral on LinkedIn with over 1.2 million views was a post that I did, and it said, LinkedIn is not a dating website.
Yeah.
It did nothing for my business.
Sure.
It was an exasperation on my part. And
Of
so
men being creeps on LinkedIn. I
men
know
being
a lot
creeps
of
on
professional women who have been subjected to that. It's completely inappropriate. Yeah.
exactly. If you're an authority, you have a unique value proposition. You have a way to talk about why you are the logical go-to person. That's where we want to start.
Yeah.
You need to have a system, we call it a signature growth system, which is your unique method to do business. That is a complete client transformation journey where people have different entry points. They can self-identify where they fall in your system.
Mhm.
And that allows you to help more people at different entry points, but you're preceding all the other pieces, because if somebody starts at step 3, it's still step 4 and 5. If somebody starts at step 1, they at least know that there's 4 more steps after this. And it's a much more satisfying experience. And then finally, you need an overall strategy. What is the business model? What's the revenue model? What's the recurring revenue model? And how do you set this up, and how does everything that you've ever done fit into this, so you have a consistent strategy that's aligned with who you are and what you do and how you want to work?
Yeah. Yeah. So it's funny. Yeah, it's interesting. You talk about the likes and the followers and some of these things that can be measured or counted. There's a phrase that I love from the lean startup methodology where Eric Ries refers to these as vanity metrics. Even the number of people visiting your website, if they are not converting into leads and clients, the number of people on your website, I think he nails it with that term, vanity metric. You might feel good about it, you might brag about it. That's not a business model.
Yes. And to your point, I think the further down in our career we go, or the better you get at what you do, the more you reduce. In the beginning, when you have to justify your right to exist and you want to talk about how great you are and all the things that you do, and the further down you go, the more you go, don't need that, don't need that, don't want that,
Yeah.
not doing that, too much work, too complicated. And you just start reducing.
Instead of taking on more, trying to do it all. And I think that comes back to the question of strategy.
Yes.
So, okay, I'll accept your invitation to make it about me and my business a little bit here. I went
Please
through
do.
I went through and did that survey. It said the thing holding me back is your strategy, my strategy. And what you were talking about a couple of minutes ago. I mean, I like to think I have, if you will, a constancy of purpose. That said, you said when the world's changing and you're doing new things and trying to go into different markets, and I'm writing different books and I'm starting this podcast, and does that create a risk now of confusion of, well, what does Mark really do? Who does he serve? What, before they even get to this question of what's the system, how could he help? I mean, you are making me reflect, and I'm sure there's opportunities to dig deeper into creating clarity around.
Well, let's do it. Let's do it.
strategy.
I'll take you through it. So the first thing then, when this is what I look for when somebody says to me, I have a podcast, I have an online course, I do coaching, I have a mastermind, I have these things, and I help people with actually not this one thing. I just had a podcast with somebody. All he does is like reminders for meetings. It's not a calendar software. It's just he just figured out how to do the reminders for meetings. That's it, right?
Mhm.
That's a SaaS product. That's one solution. That's it. But for a lot of consultants or experts, what's happening is that the market has been in such a whiplash over the last couple of years that every time you figured, something out from surviving to frugal methods to, oh my gosh, all hands on deck, fire, leadership training to
Mhm.
just kidding, we're just laying everybody off, to we have more business than we can handle, to we are in a recession. What are we going to do now? I mean, it's been so intense that you naturally have to develop all these different pieces
Mhm.
that help to do your offer. So the first thing we want to look at, we want to say, okay, so what is the transformation of the client that they go through when they come to you? So in our world with the 5-Star Success Blueprint, we help people to really figure out where the misalignment is, what's missing, right?
Mhm.
And then we build the strategy and we fill in on these pieces. But it's all around how do we create scalable systems, workflows, processes, and things like that.
Yeah.
So when somebody comes to you, so what do people come to you most frequently for?
They come for advice and help around working with engaging their people in continuous improvement, solving business problems. And when I say business problems, a lot of that has been in healthcare, primarily for me since 2005. People reach out wanting speaking engagements of different lengths. Those are probably the main things, right? And when they say they want speaking, they're also trying to solve a problem. And that problem is the problem is not we have a hole in the agenda, we need to fill it. They're looking for value from me as a speaker. So I recognize that and try to make sure I draw that out. When somebody says, we'd like you to come speak, I try to make sure the focus is not so much on what do you want me to talk about, but more on what are you trying to accomplish and what would a successful talk or workshop mean? What would that mean to you in the organization to make sure that we're aligned? Because there are times where I might say, you seem like nice people and I would love to work with you, but this is probably not work for me. Let me introduce you to someone else.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, congratulations that you are in front of the audience, because that is number one, very important thing to get the lead generation in place. And then, we'd look into that and I said, well, okay, so how does all of this fit together? Like, what is the common theme of all the things that you do?
Yeah.
And then we'll go in and we say, okay, so if the common theme is to help people articulate how to maximize, improve, existing processes, because they're not at a point where they can't just say, okay, scratch it all. Let's redo it.
Yeah.
That to me, what I'm hearing is a maximizer. And, I am not I'm a person, I'm a creator. So I can help, build these things, but I always have a maximizer on my team because that's a different skill set. So then you would go in and let's say we would say it's the business maximizer, and we for X companies, and then we identify what's their problem. Well, what does a maximizer do? A maximizer finds redundancies and cleans out, cuts the fat, gets everybody back on on the same assembly line. So handoffs, my God, if we could probably talk 5 hours over just handoffs between
right.
between departments.
That's quite often where the problem is. Yes.
That's most of the time where the problem is, because they are trained to not talk to each other and they're trained to hate each other. So so then, we built the maximizer system about saying, if there's consistent breakdowns, or it appears to you that there are breakdowns or things fall into the black hole, here are the solutions that we are offering. And then we take everything, we put it under one umbrella. Let's say it's the business maximizer who identifies, the black holes.
Mhm.
I mean, you obviously would give it way better language and a symbol and a graphic and
Right. This is a rough draft. It's okay.
and steps and everything.
Yeah.
But then what we would say, well, in step number 1 are companies that are at the point where they go, we have hostility between teams, and for some reason they don't want to collaborate. That's the workshop.
Yeah.
Then we have teams that are absolutely exhausted, that have been doing everything. They're just begging for mercy because it's been so intense. And we need to create a picture of hope and continuous improvement for them so that they feel that they're right spot, which is only like everybody in healthcare right now.
Yeah.
Right. So
Right.
for that is your 6 months program where you go in and you do 2 things. You deal with the team and you deal with the operations people, maybe 3 things, and you deal with the handoffs. Just fixing the handoffs will probably solve 50% of the problem.
Sure.
And then what's the next step? Well, now we have, done this. Now we need to go into leadership, and we need to help leadership to identify language between, so that they're not playing telephone,
Mhm.
right? Where they think they said that. I think we see this with Elon Musk now. He's like the best example. What he thinks he's saying and what everybody hears he's saying,
Yeah.
including all his users on Twitter, are like 600,000 different things.
Mhm.
But it's one message that he puts out, and it's one message of confusion.
Yeah.
So that's how we build. So first we look at sort of the system. So we pack it all in, then we go like, where's the podcast fit? Does the podcast need a slight adjustment?
Yeah.
And suddenly you are a consultant who helps companies transform at the first sign of distress, which is clearly identified, all the way to make sure that the leaders are now learning what went wrong in the process to avoid duplicating this mistake. So you almost
Mhm.
reverse engineered it's not a bottom down, but a top up
Mhm.
approach, which is not a bad approach, by the way.
Bottom up approach. Yes.
Bottom up
Yep.
approach, exactly. And then with that, we say, well, what do you want? And then you say, well, I see myself as being the CEO of a company with 10 employees. Well, now when we have a system, the workshop's done by John, the 6 months program has 5 different coaches and that go in for specific pieces of it. And then all you do is go in once a month and you do the debrief with the leadership team, and then talk to your team, and then they perform. So now you can scale your business. Now you can have your 10 people, you can be the CEO, and you can do whatever you want. That's how you could set something like this up. Making a lot of assumptions here now, of course, in the process.
Sure. Well, it's thought provoking, and I'm gonna look into this more. I'm gonna go back and do part 2 of that quiz. I'm signed up for your emails that you send out have been helpful, and I encourage people to go take a look at what Beate is doing and what you're sharing. And I think the final thought I'll add, and this is not the last thought I'll think about all this, doing a bunch of different things does not equal a strategy.
Oh my God, no.
And I think there are times when I'm guilty of that. So there's opportunity there to fix things, to maximize things. There we go.
100%. And I think, so again, there's 2 things we're learning in this interview. Number 1, identified a sweet spot that you could jump in, because 1, you may be doing it in some areas of your life, but guess what? Your clients are all doing it.
Mhm.
So if you can say, my identifying mark is people that change their objectives or strategies or main objectives every 3 months, that doesn't work, right?
Right.
So that could be an identifier, is if the direction keeps changing. And number 2, now that you've identified that you may follow that mastermind, sounds good, I'm going to sign up for that, I'm going to learn how to do a mastermind.
Mhm.
Speaking from stage, yes, that would be would be good. So, but the question is, what's the strategy of the business on how you want to create it? How do we get the leads in? Where are the leads? How are we going to convert the leads? And then what are we going to give the leads? What are the products and services? So once we have that, you're good to go. And you probably can use 80%, 90% of everything you've already done.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you sharing that, Beate, and thank you for sharing, your story. I know, like you said, there's anguish, and it's not fun to look back, but I appreciate you sharing what you shared in the spirit of helping others, and this advice of don't get involved in a lawsuit. Don't be so stuck on proving yourself right, even when you know you're right. So I really appreciate you sharing everything and about what you've done and in different settings. So I will put a link in the show notes to Beate's website. Again, our guest has been Beate Chelette. Social media profiles, the podcast, the Business Growth Architect Show. You can go find that wherever you're listening to this episode. So again, our guest has been Beate Chelette, growth architect and founder at the Women's Code. Really, really appreciate you being here, for so many reasons here today. It's been great.
Thank you so much for having me.